figured I would.
The only way to save this place, you gotta give it away.
There are two big problems with the most popular theory for how Yellowstone will end. First, it's too popular. Let me explain. So many people, myself included, think it'll all circle back to this scene from the 1883 finale.
In 7 generations, my people will rise up and take it back from you.
In 7 generations, you can have it.
I've detailed what that means in the last 2 videos, so I won't do it again, but essentially, it's time. After Kayce revealed a plan to give away the ranch at the end of episode 13, we all just figured, oh, he's gonna give it to Chief Rainwater. Problem solved, problem solved. I solved the problem solved. But Yellowstone's stars and producers have been saying from the start that the show's finale is obvious only in retrospect. They never saw it coming. Christina Voros is an executive producer from Yellowstone who's been giving insightful, if home-teamy interviews to The Hollywood Reporter Weekly, and she says, quote, "I was surprised and I didn't see it coming. When I read the script, it took my breath away." Actor Luke Grimes has said similar, and I know that they're literally being paid to hype up this show, but I don't think anyone is downright lying. Christina acknowledges the 1883 7 generation scene, but reminds us that Yellowstone has never been about happy endings, and this leads to the second problem. There was a bird in the teaser video for this finale, and if anything is true, it's that birds spell death and devastation for the Duttons. My bold prediction right off the top is that we were all right about Chief Rainwater getting the ranch, but, and this is a very big but, tragedy comes with it. What this tragedy looks like, Jamie's fate, and how the Duttons could save the ranch without giving it away are all on the way. Subscribers tell me to get to the point, so here we go. We're gonna start right there. Shout out to @TMCorey1 on YouTube for putting into words an idea I've had but not been able to articulate. Market Equities is gonna have to pay up.
I think we need to consider the possibility Sarah Atwood was involved. I think we bring in an outside firm and we start getting some separation. Hang on.
I didn't even mention this scene in my recap of episode 13, but Sarah Atwood used Market Equities money to hire a hitman for Governor John Dutton. They won't be able to make that go away with just an apology. There is a wrongful death lawsuit to be had, and in the real world, that would buy the Duttons a lot of time before having to pay a huge federal inheritance tax. Winning that lawsuit would cover all of it. This all speaks to how Kayce Dutton's plan will work, and even though there promises to be an evil twist at the end, the nuts and bolts of it are pretty simple.
So, I buy this car for $1, and then I take this $300,000 car that I bought for $1 and I register it. What do I pay in sales tax? Is it based off what I paid or the value of the car?
To recap, he thinks that if he sells the ranch for very cheap, he'd only have to pay sales tax on the sales price. The buyer would be responsible for property tax, but that doesn't really concern him. Looking back, it's almost comical how much Montana tax law has loomed over everything the Duttons have done. I mean, one of the practical reasons they didn't want Dan Jenkins building his community in seasons 1 and 2, Rainwater building his casino in season 3, and Market Equities developing in season 4, was development would cause the price of land to soar, which would create a property tax burden that would push the Duttons off their land. It's what's happening to farmers everywhere, and if you think about it, this is the only villain that bridged all seasons, but I digress. Factually, Kayce's plan was flawed, and once again I'm going to turn to your responses to Monday's video, where I asked for someone who better understands tax law. The crowdsourced response is that A, the Duttons will probably be liable for a significant federal gift tax, and B, federal income tax and state sales tax code are not the same thing. That means Kayce's example of selling a car in Montana, whether or not his conclusion is accurate, is not a substitute for selling a 750,000 acre ranch that our friend from earlier smartly estimated to be worth $4 billion. I'll leave that math up for a moment. A bunch of people suggested that because he's selling to Native Americans, he'd not have to pay any sales tax. I think they might get around some property tax, but if just selling things to Indians to get around sales tax was a thing, it'd be a lot more popular dance partners in real estate. Last week's trailer did reveal 2 things are finally coming. The first is found here.
I made a promise to your father once that your people are buried in that land, and so are mine.
There's the Rainwater's People in Warrior mode on horseback scene that we saw in the original Season 5 trailer. We're also getting this moment. Other outlets have asked whose SUV Rip and Lloyd are torching, but subscribers and Dutton Rules podcast listeners know that it's Jamie's vehicle, More on that in a moment. Something else that Christina Voros told The Hollywood Reporter got me thinking about popular Yellowstone theories and how some may have just been created to get us off track. She says the show shot diversion scenes to keep the season's plot under wraps. I now believe that that's what this was, because it just doesn't make any sense to shoehorn Abby back into the show at this point. Last week was the all-call episode. I wonder if this headline about Kelly Riley and Cole Hauser considering a season 6 isn't a diversion tactic as well. Additionally, could saying season finale and not series finale have just been another diversion trick? This leads me to what I think will happen and who will not make it.
Launch an investigation into her death and your father's. Clarify that you worked closely with her to restore the development. Vehemently deny any affair.
This scene from episode 13 seemed to be Jamie's only path forward. It's ambitious, and if I'm being honest, I'm not really sure how to reconcile this with what I think is going to happen. Beth has to fulfill this promise, right?
Seeing me will be the last thing you ever do alive.
But how does she do that with Jamie having such a high profile? Like, he can't just disappear. His death would need to be explained as self-defense, and it's here I think we get our tragedy. An impartial witness would need to have been in that room to explain that he was killed in self-defense, or an impartial witness would need to have been shot by Jamie, someone like Kayce, who wants badly to stay out of this, but just can't help but remain loyal to his family. If I'm posting betting odds on who lives and who doesn't at the end of this, I'm not sure Jamie is the favorite to go any longer. He could just end up in jail, charged with the murder of Kayce or Beth, but probably not Rip. Nothing can kill Rip. In fact, there is evidence that Rip outlasts Jamie. Like we did last week, it's time for your questions and comments with my Dutton Rules podcast co-host Addison Hager. Hi, Addison.
Billy, one last episode of Yellowstone. Where does the time go?
Maybe it's the last episode, but maybe this is just the season finale and not the series finale, if you buy that conspiracy theory, which I do not, but I'll allow for it.
That's why I rolled a little bit. But we are here at the end of this video to do a little bit of answering, or I guess reading, fans' questions that they left for us. So I'm ready to read them off, Billy, if you are locked in and mentally ready to go.
Yep. Hit us in the comments or staff@tasteofcountry.com if you have a question. But go ahead. What's first?
And I say that because this first one comes with a lot of questions. Here we go. This one came from YouTube that says, questions? I have a list in my head, but realize it's doubtful we'll get answers. Okay, so here we go. Who was Jamie's biomom? Was she related to Evelyn? Did Beck Brothers' plane explode? What happened to Lugnut Boy? How was Beth at the train station to take Jamie's pick, but she claims she didn't know what/where it was? Ooh, good point. And then last one is Walker still on parole, but went to Texas? What was that, 6?
That was 6. 6 questions. And actually live now at tasteofcountry.com is Sterling Whitaker's article about 9 questions that Yellowstone never really gave us an answer to, including what happened to the white hat floating down the river?
Yes.
Is Malcolm Beck really dead? Sarah Atwood's real name. If you remember the new sheriff, he's just kind of vanished. That kind of went nowhere. Like, obviously we're not going to get the Lugnut Boy answer in the season finale.
No.
But if we do, man, I'll just be so happy. But no, I mean, all of these, I don't think we're going to get answers to really any of these. And I think every show probably has a certain amount of sort of loose ends that people just sort of live with. 2 things. The fact that we've just invested so much into this show and that we look for these probably makes them a little bit more obvious. But I think also the show has had some fairly big ones, some inconsistencies, specifically the Beck Brothers plane. Like, they put a bomb in that plane and that bomb never went off and everybody just kind of lived on. Like, so I get the frustration here. Like, there's a lot of them. It's just sort of part of the fabric of the show. And I think we're going to kind of have to live with that as we get to this final episode.
I would agree with that. Alrighty, the second one I have for us is from Susan, who says, somebody explained to me how they were able to sell the Texas cattle that had brucellosis.
Okay. Good point. Season 5, part 1 ends with the cattle going down to Texas because of brucellosis. The cattle didn't actually have brucellosis. There was just sort of, they were aware of that in one of the pastures or in some of the pastures that the cattle would naturally graze on. So they didn't have enough pastures to provide for their cattle. So that's why they moved them to Texas. But the actual cattle weren't infected with brucellosis.
And then the last one I have for you, and it's the most popular comment. And Billy, it may or may not have to do with you. Gotta clear my throat for this one. It's regarding Billy's pronunciation. It's mar-QUET Equities, not mar-QUET Equities. I've noticed it for weeks. Maybe you can correct it for the last episode.
Have I been saying mar-QUET Equities? Yeah.
Can I admit something, Billy? I've noticed it, but I didn't want to correct you because I know there are so many things that I like. My words kind of can, when I get excited, slur together. So I definitely have quite literally zero room to talk, but I've noticed it a few times.
I've had spinach in my teeth for months, and Addison said nothing.
I'm a terrible friend. I'm a terrible co-host.
mar-QUET Equities. I think the reason I've said mar-QUET Equities, because when you kind of say it together, there's that QU in equities, and it's easy to sort of slip that into the k sound of market. So mar-QUET Equities, like
Let's
a double
together. Market Equities.
Because if I'm just saying market on its own, like I don't say I'm going down to the mar-QUET.
Right. Right.
You know, I say I'm going to the market.
I will say, I'm giving you a hard time. I've definitely said mar-QUET before because okay, well, now I can't say it at all because this is all I'm thinking about. But no, I've definitely stumbled on it. But it is funny that people have noticed.
You want to know the other most popular comment that criticizes me is people like to point out that the books behind me are not real books.
Wait, do they really?
And one person's like, oh, I've had it with this obviously compensated review of Yellowstone. I'm like, dude, if I was compensated for this, I'd have real books back there.
We wouldn't do you want to tell people what's behind there? You don't have to.
No, I'm not telling people what's behind there.
Okay. That's where
The
you hide
secrets
the
of
dead
Yellowstone.
bodies.
Thanks as always, except for that last person. But honestly, thanks, because I don't like to be wrong.
No, we love it.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.